Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about Nigeria. Now, Nigeria is in this curriculum as a country that is very new, has a lot of different divisions and variables going on. And the question is, can you actually just, plop down a democracy after decades of authoritarianism and say, oh, look, democracy really works in a country with such a fractious population? Basically, the idea is, how can you get a country to be governed successfully given its great diversity? And that's what Nigeria is really about here. So when we're looking at Nigeria, remember we're talking about the poorest country of the AP6, but also one of the most diverse, one with insanely good potential, but one that its governance keeps on getting in the way of its ability to get to the next level. Okay, first, population of Nigeria. It is the most populous country in all of Africa. It is going to be, I think it's going to surpass the United States probably in the next 100 years. It's a very young population. If you take a look here, old people, not nearly as much. Obviously, life expectancy is pretty low, and a lot of people have a lot of kids in Nigeria. Definitely the largest fertility rate in all of our AP6. Remember, young populations have costs and benefits. Number one, if young populations exist within a country, the country is very dynamic. Ideas, work, all of this is super supported. But it also creates problems that if you don't have a country that's very stable, then you have a lot of young people that don't have work, don't have opportunity, then it can become very unstable as well. You could have more instances of violence and the creation of like militia type groups and that kind of thing. So, very young population here in Nigeria. If you remember, Africa was basically carved up from colonial powers all the way up through the 1960s. Nigeria, being right here, was a colony of the British Empire. And then a lot of what was created um, isn't just a result of colonialism, but colonialism did exacerbate some of the divisions that actually happened within Nigeria. Now, the first thing we need to address here is the concept of cleavages. In comparative government, cleavages are internal divisions that impact the political system. Okay, so they're basically just divisions between different groups that impact politics within a country. This can be anything from divisions of ethnicity, religion, region, and class. And as we go along in the AP countries, you're going to see these different corresponding divisions that exist within a country. Now, cleavages can be cross-cutting, which means that when you get like two ethnic groups within a country, their divisions are kind of mixed. So if you have like, ethnicity A is 70% of them are in the southern part of a country, about 75% of them are urban, 25% are rural. Um, Muslim and Christian aren't that, off. You have obviously more poor than rich. Um, Ethnicity B is pretty similar. You don't have anything a whole lot different. And so, because there's cleavages that don't travel together, you start seeing a country that's a little more cohesive, less likely for violence. Unlike something called a coinciding cleavage, where you have multiple divisions that exist in same areas within a country, and this creates a greater semblance or possibilities for violence. So if ethnicity A is all in the north and they're all city dwellers and they're all Muslim and they're all rich, while ethnicity B is all in the south and they're all in the countryside and they're all Christian and they're all poor, then what you're going to get is this group right here, this country with these divisions that are pounding on each other, are going to have a more likely to have cases of violence because the divisions are multiplying. Those coinciding cleavages are just stacking up on each other, and there's going to be a possibility for violence and bloodshed. And it gets much harder to get a country on the same page. And what we have here is Nigeria. Notice that the two main cities we want to address is the capital city, which is Abuja. It is the political capital. It is directly in the middle of the country, and it is intentionally in the middle of the country. Okay, so the geography of that matters. The middle of the country is known as the Middle Belt. It's supposed to be the place where you're going to have the least likely amounts of violence and strong divisions. The economic center is down here on the left. It is Lagos. It is the commercial center. It is the largest, most populated city in all of Africa. There's extreme wealth disparities that exist within that city. Other places that are really important to know is right here, the Niger Delta, one of the greatest oil producing regions in all the world. And then if you go all the way to the northeast up here, Maiduguri is a lot of violence up here due to the terrorist group Boko Haram, which we'll be talking about as we go along. The number one thing you need to know about Nigeria is its ethnic diversity and its issue with ethnicity. Okay, there are first of all, there are 220 different tribes in all of Nigeria, and the number one thing that is the identifier about who you are in Nigeria is your tribe. In fact, just the idea of being Nigerian isn't really strong at all. Unlike the United States, where we see ourselves as American, we might have disagreements, but no one says, I'm not an American. People will say, I'm an American. Yes, sure, I'm a Californian, or my background is from a certain country. But no, most people will say, yeah, I'm an American. If you're from northern Nigeria, you're probably from the House of Fulani tribes. That represents about a third of the country in terms of ethnicity. Then you have Yoruban, you have Igbo, and you have Ija. Those four tribes are the tribes we really want to focus on. It is the number one cleavage that exists within the country. This is important to know because where we see ethnicity as maybe a positive construct. Oh, look, I'm a familiarity with a certain ethnic group. When it becomes your number one thing, that can create problems when you're trying to create a unifying country. And one of the top problems is corruption. And it's done through something called patron clientelism. And sometimes you'll hear it called patronage. It's a mutual agreement between a person who has authority, social status, or wealth, known as the patron, and another who benefits from their support or influence. That person is the client. Essentially, the patron says, look, I can grant you money. I can grant you access to special services. I can grant you protection. All I need in return is loyalty, allegiance, or even a simple thanks. And it's a formal relationship that starts to develop. And you can see the possibility for corruption here if you're just basically granting me money and I'm saying, of course I support you. All right. Now, there are a lot of countries in the AP6 that have really big problems with patron clientelism. We're going to see Russia has everything to do with the oligarchs and the economic class, China and the connections with the Chinese Communist Party, Iran and what political class you are in there, and of course, in Mexico and the political party and political class that happens there. But Nigeria, what did I tell you? The number one thing about Nigeria Nigeria is all about ethnicity. So if you get into political power in Nigeria, your number one job in your own mind is not to take care of Nigerians. The number one job is to take care of your ethnic group. And that is going to be known as prebendelism. It's when patron clientelism is essentially connected to your ethnicity. You take care of your people above all else. So, of course, what happens when a certain tribe or ethnicity starts to run the government? They're not caring about all the other tribes going on in Nigeria nearly as much as their own tribe. And so all the loyalty and allegiance, since you might be Yoruban, all that loyalty and allegiance goes to a patron who happens to be Yoruban, and they grant you favors and money and protection from others. Okay. So patron clientelism is really connected to the concept of corruption. And in Nigeria, these four different ethnicities are always going to work towards themselves before they deal with the Nigerian problems. Okay. And what this creates is divisions within the country. So when you take a look at poverty, notice much more impoverished, the percentage of people living in absolute poverty, much worse in the north than in the south. When you look at households without electricity, Lagos, Niger Delta, much more electricity. When you get north, oh, another cleavage, electricity and without. Okay. When you look at Fertility rates, births per women. Usually, when you have extremely high fertility rates, when you're looking at 5, 6, 7, 8, then the woman has no opportunity, no education, and is going to have less likely to succeed. And probably actually, and we get into places like Katsina, then you're talking about women that are basically socially oppressed or maybe segregated from the population. The farther south you go, lower fertility rates, more education for women. Women are not as oppressed. And you're going to notice, again, another cleavage north to south. Female illiteracy, extremely high when you get into northern Nigeria. I mean, Boko Haram kidnapped 200 girls in the 20 teens simply because they didn't want them to get an education. They literally kidnapped them from a school. In the South, not nearly the case. Okay. And of course, then you take a look at the religious differences as well. So you have Islam in northern Nigeria, and of course, Christianity much more prevalent in southern Nigeria. Another division, another cleavage. And what this creates is you have a northern Nigeria that is House of Fulani, poorer, Muslim, and they have no resources really anyway to create economic growth. When you get down into the Niger Delta, you have Igbo and Ija, the ethnicity. They're still poor, they're Christian, and they are resource intense. They have a ton of oil, but they're not getting any of that in at all in terms of their people. And then when you get into Lagos, you start getting Yorubans who are much wealthier, who are Christian, and they are resource rich, but a different kind. Their resource is labor. So before we really get into Nigeria, we got to know this is a country that is all about divisions.